Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me this week, finally, is the new Fire Chief of the City of Prescott, Holger Durre. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Thank you for being here. Hey, by chance, did you get Chief Edema's message last week?
No, but it did find his day timer. And yeah, so I made sure that that's integrated into his Outlook, which I know is kind of a high-tech tool. So I've also sent him some classes so he can actually manage his schedule a little bit better.
He was subtle.
Yeah.
In what he was trying to say.
I would say he's confused.
Yeah. He was, we were just with him, as a matter of fact, before we came over here, and he's like, I'm out. I'm not going to do this time.
He ran really fast.
He did.
I didn't think he could move that quick.
He's quick when he wants to get out of something.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it happens. But it's a pleasure having you here because you're new to the area. And, you know, quite honestly, Jonah, when we do podcasts about budgets, nobody watches. Or if it's Fatima and I, the ratings take a significant dip. But when we introduce people to other folks, whether it's folks within our organization or have a guest on, we tend to get more views. And I think because you're so new to the city of Prescott, more people are going to tune in because we want to talk about you. Right. We want to get to know you and your wife and your son and moving here, and because we're excited to have you and the things, and we're going to get to later some of the things that we can work on jointly. But let's start with, so not only are you not originally from Arizona, you're not originally from the United States.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so the name Holger didn't exactly come from the backwoods of Iowa. So
I didn't think so.
Yeah, so I came from Germany when I was 12 years old. Didn't speak the language, so English is officially my second language.
Okay.
My dad was a computer science professor, and one of the main reasons why we got here is my sister, who's blind but also brilliant, wasn't able to be mainstreamed into the school system at that time in Germany. And to give you an idea how brilliant she is, she finished Yale with her undergrad with 2 majors in 3 years, and has a PhD in atmospheric sciences now. So
wow,
they clearly made a decision that was really good for her.
What happened to you?
I tagged along. It's funny you say that. I always say that I'm kind of the slouch in the family,
right?
You know. But it was obviously a really good move for all of us. We're now all American citizens, and my dad's actually buried in the Phoenix area, so I have an Arizona connection. They lived in Phoenix for 20 years after I graduated from high school and he retired. So yeah, we're happy to be both in the United States, but also I'm the only one now at West. My mom and my sister live in North Carolina, and I'm the only one that's west of the Mississippi.
Well, before we talk about your schooling, I'd like to ask you, because you didn't speak the language when you came here, and you've shared with me before, but I think the viewers would like to know, or the listeners, how did you learn English?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I learned English is by watching commercials. Because
in what state?
In Texas, of all places, yes. So I had to learn English in Dallas, Texas.
Sorry.
That must be Fatima calling because he's running late to his podcast.
It is our attorney.
I
thought I had turned that on vibrate.
So yeah, I learned it in Dallas, Texas. And I did that also by watching a lot of commercials, just because what was actually being advertised is what's being talked about. And so there's that connection of the language in the picture, and that was the association that I needed to get up to speed. Because sure, in a textbook, you can learn English the academic way.
Sure.
But we all know that, every region has their little colloquialisms, and I had to get up to speed pretty quickly, especially in Texas.
Well, it's interesting to me that you learn to speak English in Texas, but you don't sound Texan.
No, I would say I've actually been accused of having a Midwest accent. Funny that I should say Iowa before. Right. But I think that's Colorado. I've recently found out that apparently Colorado is officially a state that's considered to have an accent. And I did not know that. And I would say it's probably like plain vanilla American English. I don't know.
Right.
We don't put emphasis on any syllables. I mean, it's just very clean, pure English to me. But yeah, apparently I have a Colorado accent now.
Well, it's interesting because when I moved here from St. Louis, I was told I had an accent, and I didn't believe that I did. And I don't know that anything's changed.
Yeah.
There are definitely areas of Missouri where there are some interesting use of the English language.
I would imagine.
If you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Backwoods type stuff. So you lived in Texas. You went to school. Your sister's brilliant. Dad's brilliant. then there's you. So where did you graduate high school?
So we spent 1 year in Dallas, and then we went to Fort Collins, Colorado, because my dad got a job at Colorado State University, and that really is my hometown. It's where I went to junior high school, undergraduate, and then that's also where I got into public safety. I started there on a hospital-based ambulance service as an EMT, and then after 5 years, found myself applying for Poudre Fire Authority in Fort Collins, and that's where I spent the bulk of my public safety career. Going from firefighter all the way to battalion chief at PFA, and it's a government model very similar to CAFMA's.
Right.
It's a combination of a city that's about 80% of Poudre Fire Authority's area, and the district around it, which is about 20%. We always call the district the donut and the city the donut hole. So very similar governance structure, but that's where I spent my bulk of my public safety career. Then I got an opportunity that was really exciting, and I never thought I would leave Poudre Fire Authority, but got the chance to be the deputy chief for support services at Boulder Fire Rescue, a city-based fire department.
Right.
And that was as far away from a governance structure and from a departmental culture standpoint that you could be from Poudre Fire Authority.
Absolutely.
Collective bargaining agreement, city department structure, general fund department. And so much more close to, in terms of governance structure, what I'm in charge of now.
So when you were graduating high school, and you had mentioned this to me before, and you were going to college, you were going to college for what initially?
Yeah, I was going to go to medical school. I was headed I was in pre-med. I got a bachelor's in biology, and I was, down the road of going to medical school, and then got into an EMT class. And next thing I know, that hospital-based ambulance service went from double paramedics to EMT paramedic cars, and I applied and got lucky enough to get on. And that then slowly and gradually built from a relief status to a part-time status to a full-time status. And as my workload went up on the ambulance service, my course load went down. And I turned a 4-year degree into a 6.5-year degree. And literally, I would say 3 months after I graduated with my bachelor's was my first day of fire academy at Poudre Fire Authority. Okay. So I got a bachelor's degree to get into the fire service.
It's interesting, and I want to say this because with all due respect to you, I was making jokes about your family and your level of intellect, but the reality is you have that same or similar level of intellect. I mean, I've talked to you. You are a very intelligent person. I think you, like a lot of people, you just found your passion was in a different direction.
Yes.
And you have been able to apply that intellect that you have and learn our trade, our profession, and really excel not only in your positions, but help other agencies succeed.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that really, is what keeps me getting out of bed in the morning. The reason why I wanted to go to medical school was to help people.
Right.
I mean, and that's obviously, when we do firefighter interviews, we sometimes say, other than wanting to help other people, why do you want to be a firefighter? And I would say it's that passion for public service is what really drew me in. That's what got me charged up. I love public government. I do. It's something that really, to me, is a great extension of the community's character, the community's values.
Sure.
And the fire service is probably the most effective tip of that spear, along with our public safety partners and police and EMS, to deliver that high quality government service. And that actually is what led me to my master's degree in public administration, rather than going back down the science path.
Right.
Was that passion for governance and effective, efficient government that really, to this day, informs my leadership philosophy in terms of the initiatives that I bring in front of our council, is about effective and efficient government. That's what I'm really hired to do, is to make sure that the taxpayer at the end of the day gets high quality service at an effective cost.
Well, and we were looking at a PowerPoint that you recently had and that you presented to your council, and the data that you were able to put together in a short period of time to really illustrate for them the Prescott Fire Department's needs that have gone unmet for years. And I think in part because it wasn't presented the same way that you were able to present it. The numbers, the data, the way you were able to articulate that. I mean, honestly, if I'm sitting on the other side, not a fire chief, and I'm just listening to what you have to say, it's hard for me to poke holes in your ask that, hey, we need to put money aside and start working in this direction because here's this. And I'm similar to you in that passion, definitely not as smart as you, but the passion for serving the community, serving at a higher level. My master's is in business administration. And my thought was, I don't want to pigeonhole myself by thinking that the governmental model is the only model, right? There's other ways to approach what we do that are more of a business perspective applied to a governmental entity. And you know what? Like you found, it works.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but some of it.
Yeah. And with that, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because, yes, there was a presentation that I made and that was part of it. When I say I'm passionate about public governance, I also want to give a shout out to the city management team and the council. And I'm honestly not making a political statement here because I truly believe that each one of those levels of governments has their particular part to play. And in the city of Prescott, what is going to make us very effective is for policymakers, the city manager, and the department heads to all engage within their specific lanes and not get outside of those lanes to bring about that effective service. And what I've found so far, in my 3 months here, is that is alive and well in the city of Prescott. And I've got a council that is interested in seeing proposals that are data-driven, that are metric-based, outcome-based, that talk about long-term, not just short-term effects.
Right.
And they want to see proposals that are couched in a manner that have good, reliable reasoning behind them.
Sure.
And my boss, the city manager, is exactly the same way. He really wants us to be creative. I like what you said about the business background that you applied to your leadership because really, even though I come at it from a different angle than you, I contend with one thing, by the way. I don't think I'm more intelligent than you are. I think we just come at it from different perspectives.
Yeah, everybody knows where I stand on that IQ scale, and it's not very high.
Well, the Neanderthal thing, by the way, is pretty interesting to me. But you can
see it.
Yeah, well. So from that perspective, our city manager really has pushed me and challenged me to get creative with our thinking.
Right.
And so that informs some of the cooperative efforts that you and I have already started to talk about. But it's also inside the city. It's me leveraging creative relationships with the police chief and with other internal service departments in the city so that we can be more effective.
You know what's interesting about that statement, because I started with a department that would have been a lot like the city of Prescott or city of Boulder, steeped in tradition, one of the oldest departments in the state of Missouri, the St. Charles Fire Department, great people, great place to work. And then I went to a district. So I went municipal to district. But I had interviewed with some municipal departments, and one of the things I always said in my interview was, as fire chief, you have to remember that the fire department is not the puzzle. The city is the puzzle.
Right.
The fire department is one piece of that puzzle. And so I have to make sure that our personnel understand that from the fire department, and that I'm working closely with my counterparts in the other parts of the city so that we're working for the best interest of the city. Because you know what? Sometimes that public works project is going to be more important than what I feel that we need in the fire department. And as a responsible public official, I need to be able to take a step back and say, no, I recognize that. I'm pulling my request off the table because that infrastructure project clearly takes precedence right now.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because one of the most significant parts of my career was in fire prevention. I had the opportunity through some internal things that were going on in the authority at the time to go into fire prevention as an assistant fire marshal at 5 years into my fire service career. And that is exactly the main outcome of that experience was my eyes were open. At that time, I was kind of the typical firefighter of, hey, the big shiny truck going down the road is what matters. And if you don't fund it, you don't care about public safety.
Yep.
And suddenly I understood the constraints from the business community, from the other regulatory partners that fire departments have to work with, other city departments that have to interface and be part of that strategy. And you're so correct, whether that means that we are more mindful about our budget requests fitting in with other department directors, or even to say we need to come up with strategic planning that integrates those governmental partners,
right,
then that I think is the right way to go about it. Because anything that's on one side or the other too extreme eventually won't be sustainable. And we need to make sure that core government services such as fire service is sustainable, and it's not just good for the next year or two. You know, when we make fire station requests, which we're about to have potentially 2 to 3 new fire stations for the city of Prescott to keep up with growth, I'm making a 50 to 75 year investment decision and a request to our tax payers. And that's something that has to have that sustainable, more comprehensive global approach to it. Because if I'm just building a fire station and I'm not thinking about, for instance, putting a police substation in that, then I'm in effect not being efficient with that money.
No, absolutely. And to be quite honest with you, and you know this from working for Poudre Fire Authority, even at the fire district or fire authority level, we have to look at our agency as a system. And that's internal and external, because while I don't have a public works department per se, I do work with the town of Prescott Valley and town of Chino Valley and town of Dewey Humboldt and all of those. And I need to recognize what their limitations are and interact with them on a regular basis so that we're working in concert with each other to provide the best possible services, especially on the law enforcement side of things with our partners at Prescott Valley PD, Chino Valley PD, Yavapai County Sheriff. So the system approach is not something that is unique just to municipal government.
Correct.
It's fire district as well. And when we go into the budget, Jonah needs money just like operations needs money, right? And so we have to balance those things out and say, no, we need to get these things done.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's, you know, that's one of the interesting things about being in an authority model that you just highlighted, is that a lot of those services that I have the luxury to some extent of having other departments provide for me, you don't have that luxury. And so even the money that you spend on fire department operations has a much more fine-tuned target that it's got to hit, whereas the allocation that I get out of the general fund is mainly for fire service operations. Right. And so, yeah, that definitely increases the complexity. And I think that also is one of the great reasons why, you know, one thing that I already saw here, even though CAFMA is a completely different governmental model to the City of Prescott Fire Department, the partnership that already exists to the residents of the Quad City area, most of them won't notice the patch on the shoulder. They just notice the high quality service that they're getting. And a lot of times, especially in more complex incidents, it's a mix of Prescott and CAFMA units along with our EMS partners that provide that service. And to the citizen, it is exactly what it should be, seamless. Right,
absolutely. And, you know, that was started before I got here, and I've been here almost 9 years, and now you're here 3 months. And the city of Prescott and at the time, Story Yavapai and Chino, always kind of worked together, trained together as an automatic aid system, and that's what was best for the region. And we continue that today, and we'll talk about enhancements a little bit later as we move forward. But in this area, we have to work as a system. We have to, and you and I have talked about this, we have to operate as one because we're like a little island up here. There's Prescott and CAFMA are the two main fire service agencies on this side of the mountain. We cover a majority of the area, majority of the residents, majority of the tourists. And if we're not working seamlessly together, then the system isn't going to work.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that even extends into other partners like Mayor and Groom Creek,
Absolutely.
The Forest Service, the state. You know, the Crooks Fire is a great example, again, of that cooperation. When I first got oriented to the immediate area around the Prescott Basin, you know, somebody said that Groom Creek is basically our last hope. And, well, that's an extreme statement to some extent because on their own, they don't exist with all of us helping them and them helping us. But it highlights that we all collaboratively work together in this space and to manage that risk and balance our resources as effectively as we possibly can.
Well, and we have Williamson Valley out on out Williamson Valley Road that we run with. It's not auto aid; it's a mutual aid system. But Mare rescues, Mare ambulances have been running in our area to back up our system on occasion, more often recently. So it is a system. There are resources, but there's still limited resources on our little island. I mean,
Correct.
we are absolutely fortunate, and I think when you look at the wildland urban interface perspective that we cover, our partners in Groom Creek, our partners with Prescott National Forest and Department of Forestry and Fire Management for State of Arizona, I don't think you can go anywhere and find a model quite like the one that we have, where you have Prescott National Forest in one of your stations sharing space. Mm-hmm. We have Prescott National Forest in one of our stations sharing space. Department of Forestry and Fire Management for the state has space at our Chino Valley Station 61. Those types of relationships you don't typically see in other areas.
Correct.
And let's talk about wildland for a second, because I came from Missouri. Mm-hmm. So in Missouri, tornado, mm-hmm. grass fires.
Did you know trees burn?
No, I didn't. So this is all new to me. But for you, and a lot of people are probably still familiar with, because it happened recently, a significant wildfire event around the city of Boulder, mm-hmm. and you were part of that event.
I was, looking at that actually as we built our strategy here in Prescott. The Prescott Basin, in and of itself, when I look at the top 3 risks that face the city of Prescott mm-hmm. residents, wildland is in that top 3. And I always say it that way because I don't want to rank, this is number 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
And, it's EMS, wildland. Those two constantly are there. Sure. And yes, structure fire is definitely up there. But really, we're a medical service agency that has to balance what you just highlighted, the significant risk that we face on the wildland front in the basin. We are in the top fire shed in terms of risk that the U.S. Forest Service study just concluded, and that includes areas in our city limits. And I am absolutely flabbergasted at the amount of cooperation that's currently going on, because what makes us so effective and able to live in that kind of environment is that not just the governmental partners cooperate, but that our residents are aware. They're much more likely to take on, like right now, being in stage 2 fire mm-hmm. restrictions than maybe in other places. A lot of the work that I was used to hearing having to be done up in Colorado, because the wildfire risk there is starting to obviously get more significant as well, has already been done here. The City of Prescott Fire Department was one of the first fire departments involved in the Wildland Urban Interface Code when it was first proposed many, many years ago. And that philosophy is not just a City of Prescott philosophy. It is literally an intergovernmental philosophy where everybody without their ego plays to make the risk as manageable as we possibly can. And I do want to say with that, the risk in the Prescott Basin is at a place where we have limits,
Absolutely,
as fire service partners, we cannot make all of the risk go away. We do need folks to be educated on it. We do need folks to be very astute as to where they live within that mm-hmm. risk. But we also need to have help from other governmental levels, the state, the federal level, and the work that you're doing right now with the Arizona Fire Chiefs on our mutual aid changes that we're proposing to help more flexibly manage resources in the first couple of hours of an incident. Those are things that we need to continue to do, and our residents do need to be very aware, especially since we're having an influx of more people.
Sure.
We need to make sure that they understand that culture, that living in an environment like we are blessed to live in here comes with a lot of responsibility and awareness.
Well, and I want to touch on one thing, because we're just after Memorial Day weekend, right? And so a lot of people are coming up here camping. Please pick your chains up. I don't know the number of wildfires we responded to this over the weekend, but there were several, mainly along roadways, mm-hmm. with multiple areas where the fire started, which indicates typically chains dragging.
Yeah.
So please check the chains on your trailer when we talk about that. So you bring a lot of that wildland experience, that background, which is really vital in the city of Prescott, because you understand the importance of your fuel program. You understand the importance of participating in off-district response, because when our folks respond off-district to assist other areas, whether it's New Mexico, we're in Blythe right now, as a matter of fact, in California, they bring that information back.
Correct.
And the more people we can have in CAFMA and in the City of Prescott Fire Department that have that experience, the better response we're going to have when there's an incident within our area. The Viewpoint Fire is a good example of that. That was one where we had a lot of resources piled onto that fire quickly, initial attack, with the knowledge and expertise to set up a command system to deal with that incident, which was great. But we're seeing a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
So we need to stay engaged, stay involved, continue to train, and continue to work with the residents because, like you said, we have POWIC out here. That Prescott Area Wildland Urban Interface Commission.
Look at what we just did.
There we go. So, and they're a great group of residents who volunteer. They come together and they work with communities to be wildfire safe communities.
Correct. Firewise communities.
Firewise communities. They are providing education, background, working with us. Just a good group of people. And again, you don't see that in a lot of areas, but they understand the risk. And you talked about fire sheds. The Crooks fire was burning in one of the top fire sheds in the country. Yeah. And we're very thankful that it burned in April because it would have been a completely different experience in talking to Prescott National Forest had that fire kicked off in June. Yep,
absolutely. And, I do want to throw some shout outs here. Both the District Ranger, Sarah Clausen, as well as Jeff Andrews, her fire management officer, they do an incredible job and recently have been awarded a $28 million federal government funding out of, I believe, the Infrastructure Act to help us manage that and not just wait for the fire to start and then respond. Yes, it helps us definitely when a fire does start to help us respond, but really to see them be so strategic. And in that strategy, they're interfacing with things like POWIC, and they're not just saying the fence line of the forest stops here. Right. They're being extraordinarily responsible partners because not only do they have that responsibility, they're members of our community.
Absolutely.
And so they have a vested interest in making sure that that's managed responsibly. And some other things that I really want to highlight here, you just mentioned incident management capability. So one of the things that I've already had a conversation with our council about is that we do have some needs at Prescott Fire because of that risk to help in the initial stages of an incident do a better job. And you highlighted one of the finer points of the need that Prescott Fire has right now to be in an off-district posture to bring that knowledge back. We, of course, have the tragedy of the 19 and Yarnell in our past. Absolutely. And I often get asked, what about the risk that's involved? And I always say the best way that we can honor that memory of those folks is to be responsible with the way that we deploy our resources. And in this case, I think one of the ways that we can responsibly deploy our resources is to increase our incident management capability here in the region. And that's partnering with you, that's partnering with the Forest Service, County Emergency Management, the Sheriff, Groom Creek Mayor, all those partners coming together so that we can have the level of an incident management team that can manage the first 24 to 48 hours of any wildland incident, but also that can evolve into other emergency management postures so that when a Type 1 team comes in, that transition is smooth. Because as we know from our fireground experience, the first 5 minutes determine the next 5 hours. But wildland is no different. The first couple of days will determine the course of that fire given some other factors. And so I'm really interested in helping us increase our incident management posture, which requires us to be very aggressive in sending, task force leaders, engine bosses, incident commanders out so that they can bring that experience back to the basin.
And that's something you and I talked about is that there are times where we have limits in either the number of people we can send out or we just don't have enough people to send. And as you're starting to build that back a little bit, there's opportunity for CAFMA to jump on a Prescott rig or Prescott to jump on a CAFMA rig so that we're working together to provide resources in other areas, which brings training back. And what we know about our folks, and this is one of the great things about our agencies, is that we're young enough that a lot of the folks that work here grew up together.
Yep.
And so you see them on their days off. They're hanging out. Their families are hanging out. That's a wonderful thing to have because it continues to build that relationship between the two agencies. So shifting gears a little bit, you've been here 3 months. What do you think? What are you seeing? What do you believe the next steps are for you and your team in the city of Prescott?
Well, first of all, I have not been this fulfilled professionally in probably about 8 to 9 years, I would easily say. And that is, I think, a testament to the culture that exists here in the public safety community. And I say public safety on purpose because it extends well beyond the fire department.
Absolutely.
So starting at the community level, the support that public safety has is refreshing here. It is very nice to be able to have good sound arguments be listened to and supported, not just a one-time thing, but philosophically. You know, the community here is unbelievable in terms of the appreciation, barbecues that we're invited to, the ways that folks want to show their support. But then that also kind of goes into what you just mentioned. The culture of our fire and public safety agencies here involves a lot of charity work. You know, the Prescott Fire Charities, the Firefighter Angel Foundation, you know, those automatically spin off into events like what we just did the other weekend of being really silly judges at a car show.
Which was great.
Which was phenomenal. And the police chief is there.
With our law enforcement partners,
there
of course.
There you go. Yeah. And it's such a great example, I think, of how public safety has such a very solid integration into the entire community. And that is something that I enjoy tremendously. And so to answer your question directly, that is something that I plan on encouraging and building even further. In terms of, you know, turning our view to the City Prescott Fire Department, we are the oldest fire department in the state, and that comes with a lot of great pride, but it also comes with a lot of energized employees right now.
Sure.
I've got an employee base that I would contend is ready to go and expand that tradition into the future with being cutting edge, with being very innovative, like we talked about earlier, and being aggressive in proposing new programs, evaluating the ones that we have for effectiveness and efficiency, and putting things out there like what currently is starting to really have effect, like our alternative response unit, which is something that I think the American Fire Service as a whole is kicking around right now as a concept to help with low acuity call volume. And so we're seeing that kind of thinking and that type of mentality in the oldest fire department in the state. And I love that combination of innovation and tradition coming together to meld the future. Where I see our vision moving forward is obviously we have to respond to rapid community growth. You are as well at CAFMA, but definitely in the city of Prescott. You know, we've got 2 brand new stations on the drawing board. We've got the relocation of 1 station as well. We've got administrative headquarters right now that are in various places for the fire department. And then we also have a city that's trying to respond as a whole based on a system approach that we talked about earlier to city service growth. And so the fire department, in my opinion, serves a vital role. So, for instance, I know that I'm going to have business development in North Prescott around the airport. Our airport director, Robin Sabata, is doing a wonderful job with the airport runway extension, but that also is going to drive demand, particularly in the commercial sector up there. And so I have to be ready to provide good fire protection so that that business sector can grow responsibly with good insurance ratings, with, you know, wise response strategies, good inspections, good regulatory environment that doesn't get in their way, but is also safe. And so those are some things that I see on the horizon. Some of the things that we're going to be doing right now is currently we're engaging in an organizational identity exercise, and that's mainly an internal facing thing. So us as a fire department, we're going to say, yeah, we're the oldest fire department in the state, but who are we now? What's our identity? What are our values? Some of them are just going to get reaffirmed. And then where do we want to be? What do we want to be as a fire department in this community? And that then is next fiscal year going to roll right into a strategic plan update. Our current strategic plan expires at the end of this calendar year. And so this fall, we'll be engaging in a more traditional strategic plan update. And that is a requirement for both our fire service accreditation, but it's also going to be the main driving tool that I'm going to be using with our elected officials and city manager to help us really figure out those objectives. How do we most effectively leverage leverage that. That's going to lead into something that you and I have already talked about, being a regional standards of cover.
Absolutely.
That's an extraordinarily exciting project, because as we start building this capital infrastructure, I want to make sure that a City of Prescott fire station isn't placed to disadvantage you, and vice versa, that a CAFMA station isn't placed to disadvantage City Prescott, because we have that responsibility to maintain that system that you just talked about into the future. And so those are some initiatives right off the bat that we're going to be engaging in on the more strategic level. Internally, we've got a lot of things happening that are exciting. We're having recruiting challenges as well, as many other public safety agencies are. But we're about to bring on up to 12 firefighters before the end of this calendar year. That's going to be really exciting to bring some fresh blood into the organization. We've got battalion chief assessment centers coming up right in the very near future. So I'm dealing with succession planning right now, which as a fire chief is an extraordinarily exciting thing to sink my teeth into. And those are some things that are just like on the fire department spectrum. So yeah, lots of exciting things happening. We're dealing with EMS in our system as well, just as you are. Obviously, we have some different needs in that area, and our strategy is a little bit different than CAFMA's. But we're also engaging in an update of our contract with Lifeline so that we can continue to provide high-quality service to our citizens. And those are just a few short things that are on the list. It's amazing to me that in a short 3 months, we've already accomplished quite a bit, in my opinion, but that doesn't really speak to my arrival. That speaks to the hard work of our staff. There was a lot of stuff that was already in the pipeline being prepared. Deputy Chief Knapp, as well as the entire fire department staff that was already working on some things. And it was very easy for me to come in and integrate and leverage that hard work into those initiatives that I just talked about.
Well, and I think you'll find similar to what I've found in this area, and that's that people want to support our agencies. We just have to provide them the information.
Correct.
We have to provide them the data. And one of the things that you talked about, vitally important, is that the infrastructure we put in, the new fire stations, really need to complement each other.
Correct.
We've identified 3 to 4 stations that we need to put up, possibly move, but maybe not. We just talked about that earlier. Culturally, we've looked at stations and said, okay, well, it's fine if they're this far apart, but then what we see when we start drawing circles around them to say, where can they get to in 5 or 6 minutes?
Correct.
You're starting to really see those gaps, especially as the area grows. And I think it's important for people to understand that when I'm building a fire station, it's not CAFMA. This is CAFMA station. It has to respond to CAFMA's area. It's where can I put this in conjunction with you so that we complement the system and provide services. And that CAFMA station is going to provide some services into the City of Prescott, and the City of Prescott station may provide some services into a CAFMA area, and that's okay. That's a system that is functional. Doesn't mean I build a station in the middle of the City of Prescott. That's not
correct.
It. But we're saying when we're looking at the communities coming together, and when you're driving along 89A now, you see the Dells project really moving along. You can't see Jasper as well from 89A yet, but it's coming. And you're going to have those connecting roads that actually connect through residential areas, the City of Prescott and Prescott Valley. And so we need to think about, how do we service that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because really this is a story I think you and I as chiefs in this area need to tell more often, of that we have an emergency response ecosystem. That's really the best way that I can describe it, is that while there's jurisdictional boundaries, and in this case, yes, fences make good neighbors. I have to come to the table and you have to come to the table with what is ours to own. And if we get imbalanced in that in any way, shape, or form, long-term that causes sustainability problems. But at the end of the day, it's that ecosystem that we have to collaboratively and strategically manage. And exactly right. The timing that those projects like Jasper and Dells are coming along with are things that we should and have to consider in our planning that is going to drive timing. Maybe you build a station a little bit earlier than we would and vice versa. Or maybe we move a station a little bit from the location that we would have put it if it was just a city limit type of exercise. And that is something that I'm extraordinarily excited about, because while there is this rapid regional growth that I think is on the forefront of many of our residents as well as elected officials, I can assure them that on the fire side, as far as the emergency response system, we're doing what is the most effective way to leverage the current governmental structure that is extraordinarily responsible in the way that we're managing that. Because if we did this in a silo as a city of Prescott without being able to have an Excel spreadsheet in front of me, I know that I would have to have far more resources that the city of Prescott would have to provide. And I would contend it's the same thing for residents and the taxpayers in CAFMA's area.
Well, and I come from personally, I come from a system where we weren't building a lot of stations necessarily, but when my last agency built our first ladder truck, we talked to the surrounding agencies who had ladder trucks to determine where's the best place to put this resource. Because yes, we need it for our area, but we didn't want to overlap another aerial apparatus. They needed to be strategically placed, and we can only do that if we communicate and work together. Now, stations are the similar thing. And as we continue to build out, CAFMA is going to need to get another ladder truck at some point. You have 2, we have 1. We're growing, and we're not just growing out, but some of it's growing up. And so those pieces of equipment need to be strategically placed in the system. The buildings need to be strategically placed in the system where they complement each other and provide the services. And we need to leverage technology to help us determine those gaps, as well as the relationship. We need to leverage the relationship that we've built already, that our staffs, some of them had, but Deputy Chief Knapp is new up here, so we're building those relationships as well, and I think that's working. So a lot more we can talk about with that, and I think you and I are going to have a lot more to talk about as we continue to work together as partners. But before we close out this week, I do want to ask you about your family.
Yes, absolutely. So you see me smiling, mainly because they'll be down here at the beginning of next week. And I'm missing them all, but obviously as a father, I particularly am missing my son right now, who's with his grandparents for, one last hurrah, so to speak, with grandma and grandpa. So he's getting spoiled tremendously as we speak, which of course is going to impact, you bedtimes and, all kinds of things next week. But God bless grandparents. I'm sure if I'm lucky enough one day to be one, I'm sure I'll understand better. But yes, my wife is currently, as of today, like as we sit here today, she's finishing up her 23rd year in public safety as a property and evidence technician at Boulder County Sheriff's Office. She was a dispatcher at the beginning of her career, and she has affectionately said she doesn't quite know what she wants to do when she grows up now. So she's going to take a couple of months when she gets down here to adjust and figure out if she wants to go back into public safety or if she wants to maybe expand into other professional horizons. She knows she wants to work. And I can't say this enough, and as a fellow fire chief, you know exactly what I'm saying here. I would not be sitting at this table if it wasn't for the support of my family, particularly my wife. I think a fire chief's spouse puts up with a lot, more than the public should and will ever know. And I cannot thank her enough for being willing to support me this entire time and throughout my public safety career, to allow me to follow my passions. And I've said that this is partially giving back to her. So me taking on this role here and the way that I take on this role is going to be with a work-life balance that has not existed in my career in the past. I was all career before. I need to balance that. I want to be a great father. I want to be a good husband. And I also want to be, balanced in my community efforts so that there's more than just public safety to who I am. And she's going to be an integral part of that. The other thing is we've got 2 dogs, a cat, some fish that are coming along as well.
It's going to be a big trip.
Yep. My dog, her name is Zoe. She's an Australian cattle dog. She's probably one of the ones that, and don't tell my family, I miss her almost the most. But she's an amazing pup. When you meet her, you'll know. She's more well-behaved than Ben by far. But that goes without saying. I always tell folks, if you see a blur somewhere around the courthouse square, that's likely going to be my son. Because he's just an active dude. But yes, they'll be coming down next week. I fly up this weekend to drive one more U-Haul load down, and then we'll be here permanently. And we're all looking forward to being a part of the community.
Yeah, I can't imagine how difficult it's been for you. I mean, you're integrating into a new community, a new position. Your support system is still in the Boulder area. You've been here 3 months, which means a 3-month separation from your family other than short visits. So having the gang back together again, I think will be awesome for you. And we want to make sure that we welcome your wife and son to the area appropriately so that they feel just as welcome as you felt when you came here. And I think in talking with some of your firefighters this weekend and some of our folks, it's clear that we want to make sure she's welcome.
Exactly.
And feels that way. Because moving away from her family to here, you've been here 3 months, had a chance to get integrated into the area a little bit. She's coming in fresh with this. And so you're going to have all these connections that she doesn't have yet. And that's where we really, as a collective, need to step up and welcome her and Ben with open arms and say, hey, welcome to the area. We love you. Here's a support network. Call if you need. Let's go to dinner, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, it's an exciting new chapter for our entire family. And with that excitement comes fear. And I really am so appreciative already of the support that I've gotten, and I cannot wait for her to start integrating. We were able to go to one of our battalion chief's retirement parties when she was here last, and she got to see a little bit of a taste of what is waiting for us here. And she was excited. And I think that excitement is hopefully going to replace that fear pretty quickly. And I don't think, knowing her and knowing my son, that it's going to take us very long to integrate really well into this community, both the public safety community as well as the community at large. Right. And we are so happy and blessed to be here for sure.
Well, my wife and I had an opportunity as you were accepting the position to sit down for dinner with you and your wife, and just a lovely person. So we're looking forward to her being here. And one last shout out that I'd like to make today, because we talked about emergency services as more than just the fire department and the 2 fire chiefs working together. We judged that car show this weekend with Chief Amy Bonney from the City of Prescott. Chief Tyser couldn't make it. Bob Tyser, new Prescott Valley PD chief. But don't be surprised out in the community if you see the 2 fire chiefs out with the police chiefs sitting down in a social setting and relaxing, because we all understand the importance of the system. And that system, as we've talked about a lot today, we were talking about the fire side, but the system includes our law enforcement partners, the sheriff, Chief Wynn out in Chino, Chief Tyser, Chief Bonney. We have great relationships with them, and you will likely see us together. I know, fire, police, one place, relaxing over a meal, cup of coffee, cats and dogs.
Yeah, cats and dogs. But you know what? Cats and dogs that play together. And I tell you what, that was one of the key decision points of where I wanted to be a fire chief, is during the interview process, is learning how Prescott PD and Prescott Fire are a seamless entity. Yeah, Absolutely. We kid each other and we joke just like now, right? But I have not seen an effective relationship between fire and law as exists here. And that's exactly true. In all localities here. And, whatever I can do to help further that, absolutely. And that may include having to compete in certain events against each other and making sure that we beat our law enforcement partners.
Absolutely.
Just to make sure they understand who's best. But
we will. And
we're going to be in the same competition.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting, just to drive the point home, that I'm a fire authority, fire district chief, right? City of Prescott has their own fire department. I can't remember a time where a police chief for a city with a city fire department invited the fire chief of the neighboring fire district fire authority to their swearing in ceremony. Correct. And then Chief Brambilla did the same thing, reached out personally, because that's the type of relationship that exists in this area. And so folks who live here should feel pretty good about the relationships that exist for emergency response. And it's all about ensuring their safety.
Yeah, and we're only as good as the strength of that partnership. And speaking of that competition, though, I do want to highlight one thing. Yours truly is going to be on Dancing for the Stars.
Oh, yeah. You need to sell that.
My 8 left feet are going to be competing against none other than Sheriff Rhodes. And we've already agreed to an informal and soon to be formal competition between our two dance teams.
Right.
So I am going to be getting this German body into rhythm, and you will see me doing a paso doble by September. And if you know my dance partner, if I don't get it right, she'll have me doing push-ups, and I guarantee you we're going to be beating that law enforcement duo. You know, and Sheriff Rhodes is much taller than me, so I have a lower center of gravity. I can do some things that he just can't do.
That's right. Yeah, he gets in his own way. Yeah. And I'm sorry, Dave, but I mean, if I'm gonna donate money, it's got to be to my buddy, the fire chief. I like you, but there it is. I want to have you back sometime. Absolutely. Because there's some things that we're working on. I want to share projects with the community that Prescott and CAFMA are working on jointly, so that people see that connection. They see us together working on things. So thank you so much for coming out this week.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Jonah, thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
We always look for your input, but you were kind of quiet today.
I'm glad.
You got no room. You guys wouldn't shut up the whole time.
No, there you go.
It's because you had two chiefs in the room.
And, you know, and I do want to thank one more time Chief Edema for allowing me to be on today and, you know, giving up his spot. And,
yes.
I mean, I realize that he likes doing this so much. And so for him to be sharing and caring the way that he is, that's
John
really nice.
Sacrifices a lot for others.
He does.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Well, with that, thank you for watching, and please remember to hit like, subscribe, whether you're on YouTube or you're on one of the podcast platforms. We look forward to sharing with you again next week.